All right, so my story begins with my parents. My father was born in 1917, not into a witness family. He started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses when he was in college. He was going to be a doctor, and after studying with them, he changed careers to be a full-time minister. And my father went to prison because he would not participate in the war. They offered him non-combat service, but he even refused that. So he served 3 years of a 5-year sentence, and his memory of that was that it was he has good memories. He feels like that bolstered his faith, and all of that was told to us as a very good thing until later on in life. I think he still always felt like it was a good thing, but some of our family had brought up questions as to how he would feel about that, since Jehovah's Witnesses kind of changed their viewpoint on non-combative service. My mother was born in 1927. Daddy robbed the cradle. And her family was also not Jehovah's Witnesses yet. She says that she remembers maybe a Christmas, but they became Jehovah's Witnesses when she was about 5 years old. She was the second to youngest in her family. And there are stories that she told about her sister, how that her sister was so glad when it was revealed that only that the great crowd would be on the earth and not in heaven, because she always felt like she didn't belong in heaven, and all of that. So anyway, my parents got married after my dad got out of prison and he was on parole. And when he returned back to the congregation where he had met my mom as a little girl, found that she was grown up, and he was quite attracted to her. And they have stories of them going in service together and sharing like ice cream cones and potato chips and fun little stories, which are nice to be able to look back on, those cute stories of young love and all of that. And his parole officer hated Jehovah's Witnesses, and one day he went on vacation, and the guy who was filling in for him said to my dad, "Do you still want to marry that girl?" And my dad said yes, and he said, "Go across the border into Ardmore, Oklahoma, and y'all get married." And so they did. And my dad was a congregation servant from those very early years. Oh, I forgot to tell you, they were accepted to Gilead. They were going to go to Gilead, and one day my dad was confiding into an older sister in the congregation, and he said, "Naomi's been acting differently lately. When we first got married, we pioneered all the time. We were going in service all the time, and now she doesn't want to. She stays in bed. She's sick all the time." And that sister said, "Oh, she's pregnant." And my dad said, "No, she can't be pregnant because we're taking measures to prevent that." And the sister said, "She's pregnant," and she was. And they had 4 little kids in 5 years. And back to my dad being a congregation servant, he took that very seriously. And I believe it was the organization that convinced him that this was his job, that he was supposed to take care of the congregation first. And so my mom was left with the responsibility of all the kids and getting them ready to go in service and ready to go to the meetings and ready to go to the assemblies and ready to go to the conventions. And my dad would leave much earlier because he had responsibilities like your kids, but he took the Kingdom Hall responsibilities, or the responsibilities as a servant, what took priority over his wife and his children. And so as I was growing up, I was told stories of my mother having to show up later than my dad, and sometimes because she had little kids after the program had already started, and she had like 3 babies in diapers because they were little toddlers, and how that the the attendant would take her up to the front row because that's all the seats that were left. And so she did. She was obedient, and she sat down her little tribe of children here. And then there was some smart aleck fella who got on the stage and in his talk decided to call her out and say, what is it about you sisters who show up late and then you distract everyone with all your children? And my mom was very resentful, and I have to say rightly so. She was resentful of my dad, and resentful, I think, of the organization or people in the organization itself. And I have to say, I feel sorry for her that she had to go through all that. My mom never had an easy life, which is sort of good because she really taught me to be tough. But she didn't ever stand up for herself, and I'm hoping to break that chain. So my parents lived in Fort Worth, Texas in the early years of their marriage, and that's where they had their first 4 kids. And then later on in the 60s, they moved to Mineral Wells, Texas, and that's where I was born. My siblings were all 10 to 16 years older than I was. And so my parents were, quite a bit older when they had me, so I kind of always had like the old parents. And my siblings were my siblings, but it seemed to me more like they were aunts and uncles. My 3 older brothers and my older sister were extremely important to me. I looked up to them so much. I had an especially close relationship with my middle brother. He did a lot of things to, he would dress me up and take me to pony shows and things like that. I remember that a lot until he moved away and then got married. My older brother married, but he stayed in the same town. My sister married very young, and she did that because she needed to get out of that house. And that's a whole nother story for another time, but I look back on all of that and I think each one of us had such challenges. My oldest brother to be the first kid, and being the first kid I think has got to be really hard because you're just the trial kid, so they did all the mess up stuff with him. And then my middle brother had his own challenges. The third, I think by the time you get to your third kid, you're tired. And so I don't know that, I'm pretty sure he didn't get the attention that he deserved. And then when my sister came along, she was the girl, and nobody ever really trusted her because she was a girl. Makes me mad to think about all of that. And then, of course, 10 years later, and the little darling baby shows up, and so I know that I was cherished as a baby, and there were stories that were told to me that, my dad loved taking me in field service because nobody will say no to a baby. And that's all nice, but I don't have good memories of my dad a lot when I was little. We had to have the family study every Monday night, and I can remember the art that was on the wall, and I remember looking at that art and thinking, oh, how much longer is this going to be? And I do remember, I remember going to assembly. I remember going to an assembly out of town. I remember staying in hotels or motels, motor hotels, where you just drive up and there's your room right there. I do have some memories that were good and some not so good. I remember kneecaps. I remember lots of kneecaps being at the assembly, and they had those tall tables where that's when they used to serve hot meals at the assembly. And I was a little bitty thing, and I was just like seeing everybody's legs. And I remember every once in a while they would put me up on that little table while everybody was eating. But all of my siblings were, of course, I mean, they grew up and they left the house. My younger brother, Roger, and I were the last ones that were left in the nest in Mineral Wells, Texas. And I have some funny memories of us being the lone survivors there. We had a dog named Chrissy, and Chrissy was she was kind of like a little Chihuahua mix, and she would pass gas. And I remember I used to say she has asthma whenever she would pass gas. That's just one of those funny stories that I kind of remember. I remember him when my parents went on Weight Watchers together, and Roger offered to hold my nose if I would take a bite of the liver and onions that they had to eat. And I was gullible and 13 years younger than him, so he had a great laugh when I was in the middle of chewing it, and it was kind of terrible. So I forgive him for that, sort of, but I still think I owe you one, big brother. But he is free, and my sister is free, and I hope someday my other two brothers get free. I'd like to feel more positive about that. Ooh, it's given me some tears thinking about it. Roger said to me the other day, when they wake up, and I had that little feeling, in my chest and in my stomach of just a glimmer of hope that maybe that could happen someday. And I really do hope it does. I'm really grateful for, the community out here that's making, that's exposing the organization for the things that it's done to really hurt people. And I'll get to those issues in my family on another video, but I wanted to load something up soon because it's been a while since I had, and this is a goal that I want to be able to tell my story. There's so many layers to it, but I think it's an important one to tell because it's of many, many, many generations and affected many, many, many people, because my parents were those people. Like, everyone knew the Kirkpatricks. So there you go. That's who we are, the Kirkpatricks. Or sometimes we refer to our family of origin as the Kirkperfects, because we had to be different. And so there's that, I think, for today. And I'll tell you a little bit more about leaving Mineral Wells next time. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll subscribe. It's only my video number 2, so if you do, well, that's a special surprise for me. But anyway, it's Sunday evening. Love y'all. Have a good week.